Restaurant Unstoppable. Inspire, empower, and transform the industry. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guests, co-founders of Kajun Kettle Foods, Chef Pierre Hilzim and Monica Davidson. Chef Monica, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Oh, always.
Yes.
Yes, I cannot wait to get into your story. But before we dive into who you are and how you got here, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Well, in this business, if you don't love it, you will live it. Learn to love it.
If you don't love it, you will live it. Learn to love it. Do you have another one, or do you want to get behind that one?
I think most people underestimate the power of great food. And that was actually told to us by Paul Prudhomme.
Ooh, I just fell in love with that guy a couple days ago after talking to Frank.
Yeah.
He was an amazing man. I wish I could have met him.
Yes.
So dive in real quick with why that resonates with you.
Well, he followed his heart and did restaurants all over the country. And he had people lining up around the block to have his food here and everywhere he went. And we have people lining up to eat our food at the Jazz and Heritage Festival, and sometimes we see 120 people in line, and that just speaks to that concept, that power, the power of great food is really incredible, unstoppable.
I mean, I really do think that the food has the power to change the world. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do, is to let our industry know that we can change the world. We won't get into that now, but I 100% can get behind what you're sharing.
Right.
And Chef, back to your quote. Why did you choose that quote?
This business is television is a little soft on the reality.
Yeah.
You work a lot of hours.
Yeah. Why don't you share the quote one more time, just in case the folks can't remember what it was? You remember?
Right. If you don't love this business, you will live it. Learn to love it.
Pick up your train of thought for me.
So, this is not a business to get into lightly. Mm-hmm. This is something that you have to have a great deal of passion for, because believe me, things will happen where you will need that passion to remotivate you and get you up off your butt and back into it. The television kind of portrays it as a very romantic, lovely thing, and there is that.
Yeah. But
not 24/7. You're up at 3 o'clock in the morning going to a market, or you're filling in for an employee who didn't show up and didn't let you, they weren't going to show up, or any of the myriad of things that can go wrong all day, every day, in any level of operation.
Yeah, so I always like to echo the mission statement here, to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. But I feel like there's a secondary mission, and that is to talk people out of getting into this industry. And if I can do that, I feel like I'm doing the industry a service.
I had sitting in my office Stephen Stills and a friend of ours who used to be his road manager, and they had decided to get into the restaurant business. And they had purchased a property right by the House of Blues, and they were going to call the restaurant Toucan Do. And I looked at these guys and said, now, which one of you is the one with all the restaurant experience? And Stephen only ate in them. He says, well, I eat in them a lot. It's great. And my friend Dan, who had done a number of things in his life, had never done anything but eat in them also. I said, guys, you sure you want to do this? And I tried for an hour and a half to talk them out of it. And I looked at Stills and said, Stephen, you will lose between $1 million and $3 million in this project within the first year, period. There's no way it's going to not happen. He looked at me, no. I've even got sites located in Maui, and one in the Keys, and one in Spokane. And I'm going, great, you can market a lot really well having them so close together. The restaurant collapsed after 120 days, 5 lawsuits, 2 federal, 3 arrests. It was a pretty messy breakup, and it cost him $2.6 million.
Oh man, you were about $1 million short.
I know. I was being easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to. The first thing I do to you, if you tell me you want to open a restaurant, is try to talk you out of it.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. So where does it make sense to start sharing your stories? I know for you, Pierre, that your dad was in this industry. When did you guys cross paths? Because you came back to New Orleans in 1981. But when did you guys find each other?
Well, in the late 70s.
Late 70s?
In San Francisco. I was...
How old were you in 81, if you don't mind me dating you?
20... How old was I then? 24, 25?
I think so.
Around that
something
age.
like
So you
that.
guys found each other young. You were a teenager.
Yeah,
when you
I
knew
know.
each other.
No,
I was
actually,
a child. I was a young
Yeah,
child.
she was
I
very
was a
young.
teenager
She's a lot
for
younger
sure.
than I am.
Yeah.
So how did you? So did you guys? So did you know you're going to be in the industry? Your dad was in the industry. Like, get into that. We'll divide and then we'll come together when you guys meet each other in real life. How's that sound?
I put myself through college in a hotel called the Pontchartrain in New Orleans, and we had a world-class dining room called the Caribbean Room, and it was a great hotel. It was small, 103 rooms, beautiful suites, an A-list of clients. It was just a really gracious, wonderful hotel, and then moved after I got out of college here. I needed a change of venue, so I decided I had 3 job offers, and one was for the Peninsula in Hong Kong, and one was for a hotel in Switzerland, which scared me to death, and the third one was for a hotel in San Francisco called the Clift.
Okay.
And I chose the Clift, and walked in the door, and they said, "You're the guy from New Orleans?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, we sold the hotel yesterday. You don't have a job."
So you go all the way out there,
Right.
and they didn't even think to call you to let you know.
That would have been too easy.
Man. So wait, I think you might have mentioned it, but I might have missed it. I know you went to Louisiana.
LSU, New
LSU.
Orleans, yeah.
What did you focus? What was your major?
Business. At that point, there was no hospitality industry classes whatsoever here. They now have a fabulous, really, really good restaurant and hospitality industry division, and put out great hotel GMs and things. That happened part of the time I was here. I was a front office manager at the Pontchartrain.
Okay.
And we helped establish that curriculum at LSUNO.
Okay.
I just missed it.
But you knew you wanted to do the hospitality industry.
Yeah, my father had run the Louisiana Restaurant Association when I was a child.
Okay.
And that got me interested in restaurants. It would.
He didn't try to talk you out of it like my parents did?
No, he didn't. And when I got really deep into it, he had passed away, so he wasn't there to try to correct my
desires,
my ways.
Yeah.
What can I say?
So okay, that's a good stopping point for you. And at this point, you're still really young, right? Because there's a little bit of an age gap between the two of you, right? So where are you from?
Well, I was born in South America, in Chile.
Okay.
My father was from the Bay Area, and my mother was Chilean. And Dad went down to South America to work as a controller for American Copper Company. And they met and got married, and all my sisters and I were all born there. And then we went all around the world. We lived in the Caribbean, Central America, and North Africa.
Wow.
Before coming to the States. So I came to the States when I was very young, and but had already lived in a lot of other places and picked up a couple of languages. And
Yeah, 3 languages you speak. I think it was German, French, and there's another, or 4, I guess.
3.5.
3.5.
Yeah.
So what English, obviously, and what's the half that I'm missing?
The half is German.
Oh,
I took it in high school, and my mother's family was German, originally from the 1700s.
That's so impressive. I wish I could do people who can speak multiple. I just have no idea. Like, that's such a skill that I envy. So
it's a wonderful window into another culture, and in a way that nothing else really comes close to. When you can speak another language, it really gives you a wonderful window into a different world.
So is it Spanish, French, and half of German and English?
Yes, and then our daughter speaks Portuguese. My sister speaks Norwegian. My other sister speaks Italian and German. So there are a lot of languages in my family.
I mean, just especially being able to speak English and Spanish, you can go to so many places in the world and just be able to like make your. That's such a. I'm jealous. I have to say. So
thank you.
Yeah. So so when you came to the States, were you in California?
Yes, we came to California eventually. We came. We drove cross country, came to California, and then I went to junior high and high school in the San Francisco area, and in Marin, north of San Francisco.
Okay.
And ended up at Berkeley majoring in linguistics.
Okay. And did you find yourself working in the hospitality industry?
I was not. I was working in the job placement business, and I was at Macys, California, in their executive training program.
Okay.
And had some buying experience from that, where they bought for 25 stores in California.
So at what point do you two cross paths?
Well, when I was working at Macys, one of my coworkers invited me over for dinner, and guess who was the chef?
Oh, I can have a couple guesses. Maybe Chef Pierre.
Yeah, I lived in a big house on Broadway in Fillmore in San Francisco. And I mean, this thing was huge. It was 4.5 stories.
Yeah.
And we had an incredible deal on it. It would cost me $210 a month to live in San Francisco.
Can't do that today.
How about $210 a day?
Multiply
Okay,
that by 10,
and
right?
that's your rent.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And one of my roommates her family was IRS Records. Her little brother was the drummer for the Police, Stewie Copeland. And so we got hooked into the music scene in San Francisco pretty heavily. And so we get to go see everybody who was touring through. Who'd go to Winterland or play. We could go see a lot of music and stuff, and that was fun. And once a week, we had Wednesday nights. We had bring people over, and I would make something.
Okay.
Yeah, just get them going.
So my mind works chronologically. I swear I'm not trying to date you. What's the year now because I know you guys came here in
75.
75. Okay.
I got there in 75.
So about 6 years before coming back.
Yeah.
So you got there in 70. You got to California in
75, and that we left in late 81.
Okay. So we kind of skipped over because I wanted to make sure we got both come up stories, or how the little bit of the backstory for each of you. You left off by saying that you came out to San Francisco, and when you landed, your job was gone.
Right.
But you found a job eventually. So
Well,
what happened from there?
Down the street from where I landed to stay was a car dealership, and I said, "Well, I got to eat. I can't call mommy." So I walked in and got a job selling cars, and it was funny because we were a Pontiac dealership, and Pontiac was allowed to duel with Honda, and because Pontiac was falling through the floor in sales, so we became a Honda store, and we were one of the first in the Bay Area, and we had a Honda which was you could put in your trunk of your I could put it in the back of my Yukon. Okay, it was tiny, but then we also got the Honda Accord, and that dealership zoomed. It was $5,000 to buy the franchise from Honda, including parts and signs. It was a steal of a lifetime.
So I thought when you first said the delership, what kind of dealership it was, I thought you said a Ponzi act dealership. And I was like, that makes
Pontiac.
sense.
it was an interesting lesson I was taught. That
you started telling some stories before
go
we
from being the hotel industry and how you treat people to being in a car dealership and how you treat people is a 180.
Right. And I will say this about the car dealership industry. It has done a big 180. Speaking of 180s, it's all about taking care of your guests now, and that brings return. And that's a lesson for the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about the return visits. Right. It's 5-10 years down the road after selling that car, they come back for the next one if you take care of them the first time. And that lesson applies in this industry too. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's true. Plus a lot of federal legislation kind of took away a lot of the kind of nefarious tools that some of them had, and the attitude changed. I mean, it was no longer this kind of legal way to steal to where you were selling a merchandise that had a sticker on it, because there didn't used to be price stickers on cars. So you would walk up and that car was $5,000, and somebody would walk up and say, "No, it's not," and they had no way of knowing. So that was Monroney stickers.
You didn't have the internet to do the research too, and that's really kind of when the dealership industry started to turn around, when you couldn't pull fast ones as easily.
Yeah, when I can pull an invoice up and see what that dealership paid for that car, kind of the secret was out. And then you have online abilities to get used car pricing. I mean, information exactly. Led the way.
It's power.
And the power of it, and the fact that and then people started realizing they were being treated very badly, and they fought back.
And more women. I think more women have become car buyers and have been started working at car dealerships. That's what I look for when I go to a car dealership.
Why is that?
Because I think women kind of look out for the customer a little bit better. They the customer service aspect of things and especially when you're dealing with another woman, I think you understand what some of their objections might be and some of the things that they don't like about the
A little
industry.
more compassionate, maybe a little more sympathetic.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't argue with that. Maybe. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No.
He doesn't agree, I'm sure.
I didn't stay in the industry that long. I mean, I ended up with a team that was running 7 dealerships, and I just was burned out by the whole attitude and the pressure that was on you to do things that you didn't agree to, didn't feel very comfortable about doing.
That was my follow-up question. What was it like to come up in a world of hospitality with your dad and the experiences I'm sure you had, and what was that like?
Well, there was 2 sides to it. One, I never made more money. I had never made as much money as I was making running dealerships. I mean, I quite honestly, I had months in San Francisco where I was making $7,000 to $8,000.
Yeah, there was no shortage.
In the 70s, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, a lot of money, and you had a car, and you had, it was, if you were willing to do it, you could do very, very, very well.
Yeah.
And I just got tired of the run around, and I missed the food. I missed that environment and so forth. So I got out of there and went to work for a group that owned a hotel and owned a group of restaurants called What This Country Needs. And I started working for them.
Okay.
Back into the business.
Let's bookmark that. And I'm curious, working for a company like Macys, that's a well-oiled machine company. Is it safe to say that? I'm sure you picked up some good life lessons working for an organization that organized.
I did, but I guess I shared Pete's frustration at working for a great big company where nobody knows who you are, and you're kind of just a small part of a bigger machine. And I ended up leaving there to work with somebody who came to call on our department because he was starting his own business, and he was doing a bunch of real exciting things like looking at new furniture and new paints and doing marbling and kind of he had a passion for doing things that were different, and I ended up leaving Macys to work with him, and it was a good move for me.
Yeah. So before we talk about the move you made and what the skills you were picking up during this time, what were the skills that you think you really kind of set you up for success working at Macys to this day, if any?
Well, it really taught me that everything is seasonal when it comes to sales and clothing, and that also applies to the food business because when things get cold, I mean, here summers are incredibly hot, and so soups don't sell well here during the summer, which is obvious. Yeah, but I mean the kind of the cycle of business and how different things do better in different types of seasons and things like that. Kind of looking at the bottom line. There are so many intangibles that go into play when you're talking about buying clothes or buying hardware. I mean, everything is slightly different. And then I decided that as a result of being at Macys and things like that, that I really needed to go back to school and get my MBA and start looking at classes in the business world, like accounting and finance and business law and things like that. So
what I would like to focus on, you guys kind of brainstorm, were there any key mentors for either of you during this come up? I don't know, maybe before or after you guys met. When you met, how long did it take for you guys to start kind of like getting closer and kind of, I don't know, were you working together at any point? Like, I'm not too sure about the dynamic of your relationship before 81, I guess.
No, we were just dating. I mean, she had her job and her life with Macys. And at this point, I had moved over to work for the Rossi family and had gone to work for their hotel, helping them design. They took over a place called the Barrett Motor Hotel, which was a block off Union Square, and they turned it into a Hotel Donatello's that, let's put it this way, they spent $400 a square foot on the decor package for their fine dining room.
And this is 1980s.
This is 1970.
70s.
78.
what's the inflation rate with that? Like, what's the equivalent to? Like $1,200?
I can't even guess. This
dollars,
place, the fixed price meal, and this is 79, was right at $100 to $120 a head, and they got it. They were full every night.
That was probably a very extravagant meal.
It was an extravagant thing. They were just big time Northern Italian food, and they convinced me that one of the brothers that owned it had this group of soup salad, very much like Panera type operations, that weren't doing very well, and he convinced me to go take those over and fix them.
And is this all with the Rossi family?
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me about the Rossi family. Would you say this is kind of where you grew the most as a professional?
Yeah, it's where I switched over and started expanding my skill base. And instead of, I line cooked in that restaurant, which was is a very interesting experience. So my real deal is creating products and doing stuff. So that's where I am now. But back then, basically a line cook, I knew that part of culinary world wasn't for me. I'm driving across the Golden Gate Bridge from Marin County into San Francisco. It's beautiful. The birds are flying. It's one of those picture-perfect days, right?
I've done that drive. It is gorgeous drive.
It is gorgeous. And it's 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning, okay? And I'm dead. I should have been on there at 5 o'clock. I'm an hour late.
Oh, my goodness.
Which means I'm going to go get my butt kicked.
How many pans did you dodge that morning?
Oh, God. It was like, no, there was only me and one other person in that kitchen feeding at that time.
Wow. And
it was a nightmare. It was one of these days. It's like, God help us.
How vivid do you remember the day?
Oh, they brought a case of eggs down, okay? And I'm trying to do a poached egg. The whites would just liquefy and disappear. And there'd be a yolk floating around in there. And I'm going, what the? Yeah. Dump the water, re-vinegar it, bring a fresh case of eggs down. Same thing.
What was happening?
The eggs were old.
I thought that might have been it.
And they were old from the delivery because the delivery had been made the day before.
Okay.
And I finally went through the third case. They started working, but
it's just one of those days.
In breakfast and in timing like that, if you miss, the timing doesn't work. It is you're progressively deeper in the hole because orders are backing up here. You've missed your sequence because everything is sequence cooking. Then you've got 4 things going at once, and you're booming things out like this.
Yeah.
Right? Tables don't want to get one person at a time. All right? And this just, your brain explodes.
Oh, man.
You
You're giving me anxiety just thinking about it right now, I'm being honest. But
it was a bad day. But everybody has that, and that's part of the industry. That's part of your day in the restaurant.
If the meal was $120 a head, for dinner, I don't know what breakfast, but I'm assuming
this was in their smaller dining room.
But same clientele?
Same clientele.
They don't like food not coming out on time. No.
And they don't understand. There is no understanding of why it can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where I'm going with this is it sounds like the Rossi family was a very successful business fammy.
Yeah, they were some interesting folks. Yes.
So was it a positive influence as far as did they help form and maybe give you some values or knowledge, skill set? Like how did they help influence and make you into the man you became?
They and their management was sink or swim. They said, okay, here, take over these restaurants, go fix them, bye.
So maybe that's
See me
not
next
the
week.
best advice, I guess.
See me next week. Okay, don't call
so
me.
you learned maybe
you.
what not to do. I guess is that.
Yeah,
is that
they
fair to
said
say?
we've got problems. Money's not falling to the bottom line. Why? And they had problems. They had money shrinkage problems that were pretty interesting. They had supply side problems that were pretty interesting.
I feel like you're being suggestive. And
all right. There was a GM who was cashing in all the receipts he could find.
Okay.
There were vendors who were working with him and kind of overcharging.
But why do you think this is?
Because nobody was watching.
Well, also, what kind of loyalty are you going to get in that type of environment where your employees don't feel like you have their back?
Well,
and was that a stretch?
Yeah, it was a real stretch. And the people who were working for me just kind of closed their eyes because they needed the jobs.
Okay.
And so, I had to get rid of some people. And as soon as I did, things all of a sudden started turning around. And we were doing. I mean, we were soup, salad, sandwiches. A bowl of soup was $2.98 with a piece of French bread, and these were marvelous soups. I mean, this was good quality food. We had great desserts. We were the largest consumer of espresso coffee in San Francisco County.
Yeah. And you were here for about 6 years?
Yeah.
What were like the key evolutionary points for you as far as a professional?
Well, that was going back in and running the restaurant and dealing with the food, looking at how we could get this place turned around and do the right things. It was front of house management.
So did you turn it around?
Yeah.
How?
Fired the guys who were stealing the dough. A. B. Sat down with the people who were overcharging and said, you have two choices. Either I can rat you out to the Rossis, and you didn't want them mad at you. Okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't a good idea. Or you will come back down to earth and we'll have a straight relationship.
Okay.
And they go, you don't want any money? I said, no, that's what we're going to stop. And it stopped.
Yeah.
And the ones that didn't stop no longer got orders from us.
So distill the lesson here.
If you don't run it straight, if it's crooked at top, it's rotten at the bottom.
Yeah.
It don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So, once people are seeing you doing things right and you're treating people fairly and it's not a favoritism contest, things do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean it's an issue with culture. It sounds like, right? Yeah. And culture is reality. Culture is perception is reality. What you perceive, what's going on, like that's the reality of your business. And the only thing you can do is force it to change, and to get the people out that are bringing it down. Right? You can't expect to keep people on staff that aren't walking the walk. Right? They either fit or they don't fit. And if they don't fit, you're out of here. Is kind of what I'm hearing.
You give them a chance, and so this is how this place is going to work now. It's not the way it used to work. It's the way it works now. And if it doesn't work that way for you, if that isn't something you can do, we'll make some changes and I'll write you a letter.
Why is it important to give them a chance?
Because you don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater, because you have people, because they've been shown that model was okay. Even though they didn't think it was okay, they kind of, they're people. Come on.
Maybe they were hired maybe they came in, the culture was like that.
Yeah.
And they saw other people doing it and they said, this is normal.
Yeah.
Right? So you give them a chance. The people who continue to do it, you don't get a second chance. Right?
Right. And a lot of these kids, a lot of the people who worked for me were not American citizens, or were not, they were people who'd come and moved to America, may have been first generation and stuff. And I mean, this was, in some of the cases, the first job they'd had in America. Mm-hmm. And, if this is this is how the rules are, you adopt that.
And I think that right there is the key to why the restaurant industry has so much power, or the hospitality industry has so much power to change the world, is for so many people, this is the first job they've had. Okay. And you kind of set the standard, and you get to really kind of influence and, I don't know, like be the first impression for people. So if we can be an incredible first impression for people, what kind of power is that to go into the future? What are your thoughts?
Oh, it's great. I mean, that you don't want to replicate what's wrong. You want to replicate what's right. Mm-hmm. And the more that's right, the more right it gets. Mm-hmm. So it's and that's such a vulnerable position that a lot of these people are in, because they got to have the dough, or else their kids are not going to eat.
Yeah. And Monica, I haven't forgotten about you.
No.
So coming back over, just like Chef Pierre did, what was going on with you? How are you growing? What were the lessons you were learning? You had a new mentor, a new business opportunity. Did things change, or did things improve for you as far as your happiness and your professionalism, I guess?
Well, I mean, what I sort of didn't mention was that that my dad was also a big influence on me.
Get into
as well. My dad was a kid who grew up, lost his father at 11, grew up in Oakland, California. Had an older brother who helped guide him to succeed in school. He went to Berkeley and then got into Harvard. he had no money. He got into Harvard without having a car and living in California.
How do you do that?
So what he did was he took the train and he hitchhiked between California and Boston, and then he worked in the cafeteria at school. And that's always the story that I found very inspiring, because he found a way to make things work for him and to get what he needed to get with no resources. And the other part of that was that I think that he felt that he needed to show the world or his family or himself that he could do it, that he could achieve it without.
Was there a doubt?
Well, I mean, isn't there always?
Yeah.
When you're a kid and you've got no dad and your mom is far away and his brother graduated from Harvard too, but anyway, so he it was that determination when he showed me that he used to have a little straw suitcase and a bowler hat, and he wore a freshly pressed somehow white shirt every day with the bowler hat, and my dad was blonde, blue-eyed. Anyway, so he'd get rides, or he'd ride the train. And then after he did that, he ended up working for American companies all over the world. But when he got back, and one thing he never really liked was working for others. He's very self-motivated, and went everywhere. I mean, when we lived in Morocco, and we went to Europe every summer, and we went everywhere in Europe. I mean, everywhere you could mention. We went across the Strait of Gibraltar, 9 miles across. Wow. And then drove everywhere. And we went to every single museum there ever. I got lost in every single museum that ever existed. I learned how to ski in Lake Como. We were on American salary. It wasn't that we were so wealthy, but in comparison, I guess, in those days. So anyway, that was my education. I got a feel for what the rest of the world was like, and eating food all over the world.
Just still one or two of the biggest lessons your dad taught you. One clear thing is just motivation, dedication, commitment, persistence. But what else?
A work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
And basically he said, look, there are things that are going to tie you down in life, that are going to be obstacles, but you don't have, really, there is no excuse for you doing your job. And no matter what happens, no matter what gets in your way, you need to get it done. And no excuses. You just have to do it. And he had an incredible drive to succeed.
I love it. Beautiful stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I'm happy we got into it. So we're back, and we just got to the point of your career. You guys kind of give us a good backstory of who you are and how you kind of got to this point. And we're at now in your storyline around the time where you guys crossed paths for the first time. We knew it was a dinner party. You were the chef. Mm-hmm. Is there anything up to this point in your storylines that need to come out before we go forward? I don't want to make sure we miss anything.
No, you're looking for motivations.
Lessons, turning points, evolutions.
I had left the Pontchartrain thinking I was definitely on a line to do hotel management. I was asked to go to New York to the Ezra Cornell School of Hotel Administration for graduate studies, and I just realized, I looked at the GM at the Pontchartrain, and this guy was a graduate. He was smart. He worked 6.5 days a week. He was up to about 3 packs of Pall Malls a day. His tension, you could cut, the stress on him was amazing. And 24-hour operations are really difficult, right? And I just looked at that and I said, I don't think that's really what I want to do in life.
I was waiting for that to come out of the story. I knew it was a matter of time. And I think that one of the reasons why I'm really excited to make an example of the both of you is because the hospitality, the food and beverage industry has so many verticals of opportunity. And I think when people get into it, a lot of people don't realize that the amount of paths you can take.
Oh,
right? And especially if you're somebody who's more on the creative side and you like the creative element in creating things, but not maybe necessarily all the stress that comes with running a restaurant, right? What's going through your mind? I don't want to make too many assumptions. So what's going through your mind? Am I on track?
Well, I realized that I didn't want to only work. I wanted a family. I wanted to have a little more than that in my life than I was seeing this poor guy have, because he had little kids, and I wondered when he saw them. Quite frankly, I mean, it was an incredible load on him, and the hotel was successful. I mean, we ran 75 to 85% occupancy, which is year round, which is very nice, and the restaurant was banging it out. I mean, it was a great restaurant, and it was doing the dance. It really worked quite well. So anyway, that's when I started wondering what the hell I wanted to do with myself.
Yeah, and we don't have to get too far down the restaurant road, because what's awesome about being able to speak to the two of you is because I don't get to talk to people who do what you do, which is invent products and market your products to restaurants and venues across the world. And this is going to be a great lesson if we're somebody who loves the creative side of the restaurant industry, and we want to create food, and we are passionate about just food in general and creating that creative element, but we don't necessarily like the idea of being stuck on a line or making the same. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down. What are some of the other options? And one of the other options is exactly what you do. So today's going to be a lesson in how to do what you do. I want to, if we're listening to this, like, I like that path. What would you even define your business as? What do you do?
Well, all right. I am a research chef. Okay. That's my qualification. And there is the Research Chefs of America. I mean, it is a position now. It's very different from being a line chef, a line cook. It's a combination. It's called culinology. It's a combination of science and culinary skills. And it's a different approach to food. So it attracted me because at home my father was always creating dishes, and my dad had been a tail gunner on a B-17 over Germany. Okay, he flew 37 missions and lived.
Wow.
By the time you crossed 30 missions, your survival rate was 10. Your chances of survival were 10%. And he never, ever understood why he lived and didn't die. He was very guilty about that, and he would never talk about it. And, I mean, he just, that haunted him his entire life. And he had, if he had known he could do R&D work, I think he would have been a much happier person than he was. Even though he ended up going back and getting a PhD. Unfortunately, he died right after he got his PhD in English literature. That was his passions were literature, music, and food. So it is a guy that finally went after the literature part of his passion, and that made him a lot happier human being. Okay, because he wasn't out before then.
So you're a research chef. That's the category you would fall into.
Right.
And Cajun Kettle Foods would be considered what type of business?
We're a food manufacturer or processor.
Okay.
All right. And the way that the path that we took into this was when I was still in San Francisco working for the Rossis at What This Country Needs. We had one of the outlets we had was adjoining the Hyatt Hotel on Union Square, and we were there. That's where we produced all of our soups because they had this huge boiler system and we had free steam. So they had built-in kettles and stuff. And we had a gentleman named Mr. Ng who was this wonderful Vietnamese chef, and he would cook soups at night. And in the mornings, you'd go in at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and there would be 5-gallon buckets lining the floor. And he would just leave them out to cool off, okay? You don't do this, okay? How we survive without killing anybody, I don't know. But we were. That's how we were producing. And one day, a guy walked in, and he was a research chef, okay? And he worked for a company called Cryovac. And at that point in time, Cryovac owned another division of that company, owned 4,000 restaurants. They owned a bunch of fast food restaurants all over the country, and they were having problems with distribution. So they'd figured out that they could take the beef casings that they made that had clips on them and put liquids in them and chill them real fast, pack them over pasteurization temperature, and chill them real fast. And you would get a shelf life, and you could get a month out of a bag of soup. So they could make first quality food, pump it hot into these bags, chill them, and put them in a truck and get them to Daryl's and what else? El Torito, they owned that. They owned Daryl's. They owned a whole bunch of these chains all over, and they could ship that way. And that led Cryovac into being a fairly small company with real heavy plastics technology on things like gas pass-through, all the science of a boil bag and of modern packaging, to what we do at Kajun Kettle, which is use the same basic cap cold concept. And it's astounding what you can do. I mean, it makes commissary work and high quality food into restaurants a possibility, and a bigger and bigger possibility. But that's
it's primarily because of the shelf life of being able to get it from one place to another without it spoiling.
And the quality you can get out of it.
And maintaining the quality.
Yeah, it maintains the quality beautifully.
So one thing I didn't ask, and I had meant to ask, and I don't think we're too far away from that part of the conversation, is if somebody's interested in being a research chef, what are some of the clues that suggest that might be a good path for you? What are the special skills you need to be a research chef?
You need, first of all, you need a basic understanding of the science of food.
Okay.
Because if you don't understand how it works, you may be able to come up with a really great dish in a restaurant. You probably won't be able to replicate it. And then when you take it, if you're doing this for commercial use for like a restaurant group, you might not be able to manufacture it exactly the same way you can do it with a pan and a gas burner and stuff, because that there's different things that happen in timing and temperatures and stuff that make it a different world.
What about some like the natural skills or natural abilities?
All right, one, you've got to be creative.
Got it.
Two, you have to have a science bent. You have to be able to understand the science part. Three, you have to have some kind of mechanical aptitude, because you have to understand the mechanics of what's going to happen. It's an amalgamation of things, a combination of things of things like that.
So at what point do you think that maybe this is right for you? This is what you want to do?
Well, if you've been on a line, you love the food side, you're interested in the side of why does it work this way, and how do I make it work this way every time, and you're tired of the stress of line work, you can go. A lot of guys that are my friends that are exec chefs and so forth, you get tired of all that management and stuff like that, and you can move into this. Yeah. And a good executive chef has a very good salary. And, I mean, you work for the great food companies of America. There's all kinds of us out there.
Yeah. I mean, is it safe to say as an executive chef, there's maybe a little bit lower of a ceiling that you hit versus there maybe being a much higher ceiling in this vertical, because you're kind of limited, because you have basically where I'm getting at is intellectual property.
Right, exactly.
And I think people don't realize if you're a creative person and you can create things that not other people can't create, the sky's the freaking limit.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to recognize if you're good at something, don't sell yourself short. Not to say there's anything wrong with I could never be a line cook. The skill sets you need to be able to manage and juggle that many things, I would not last. I know I couldn't do it. So please don't interpret what I'm saying as that not being a respectful job. But if you are one of the few people that have a science brain and you're creative and you're mechanical, like all these things you're saying, and you don't necessarily want the wear and tear if that's not for you, the kitchen, this is a really great career path for you. So, but we don't get to learn from people who take this path, which is why I'm really excited to talk to you. I haven't forgotten about you, Mona, because I know you guys are in lanes. And so
we are.
Yeah. And I'm interested because you need both sides, because it's not just creating the product. It's also promoting, selling, distributing. and I'm sure, and I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm kind of guessing. Am I right? Let me just ask you, what are your lanes? Where do you feel like? What's your responsibility?
Well, when I first started, Pierre asked me to start working with him. I told him it was a terrible idea because we were married, and married people should never work
Do you
together.
still feel that way?
And but I will say that I considered it because I knew that what Pete was doing at the time was doing things like going out with Paul Prudhomme and Paul would say, "Hey, Pierre, meet me at 4 a.m. at such and such a place." And I thought, if I don't work with him, I will never see him. So we might be divorced because we work together, or we might be divorced because we don't. So either way, I knew that somehow I had to try and fit into what he was doing in my own way. And I had a lot of experience at Macys, and I was on the selling floor at Macys actually for a little while before I went into the offices, and I loved it. I loved the contact with people. I loved meeting new people. I loved just going around and I was really much more involved with the retail part. We started a retail line that had 11 items in it, and I went around and sold it to a bunch of stores. I went to 10 stores a day, 5 days a week, and I did in-store demos on weekends. And, I put the product into a bunch of over 75 retail stores, and it was doing pretty well, and I was having a lot of contact with customers. That's what I really loved. I really loved that I was able to go in and sell a product, and I felt like if you're not there, if you're not talking to people, if you're not looking out for what's going on with your products, then you're not going to do well. I mean, you're not going to succeed. And Pierre was involved in the Chefs Association and the Research Chefs Association. So he was very involved in that aspect of things. And working with Paul Prudhomme was just an amazing experience for him.
I'm a new Paul Prudhomme fanboy, and I wish I could have met him when he was still around to get him on the show, just because of what Frank Brightson said about what this guy would do for his people. As far as just from day one, even before you work for me, what do you want from your life, and how can I make that happen? And then following through on it. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing. What were the lessons? You worked did you both work really close with Paul?
Mostly Pete.
Okay. So what were the lessons? Did he teach you anything about how to be? We need to cement this man's legacy. Well, because he just sounds like he was so incredible.
And here's a guy who was 13th child. Okay.
Wow.
He was a big man. When I met Paul, he was 5'35".
Wow.
Okay. And that's a big guy.
Was he tall?
5'9",
okay.
5'10".
Gotcha.
No. So he was a big fella, and his ability just to do things, to get it done. He went bankrupt 3 times. All right. His first joint was called Big Daddy-O's Patio, and he got married right around the time he opened it to his high school then sweetheart, and I think she was probably 16, and it lasted maybe 90 days, and she flew the coop, and he said to hell with it and went off. But I mean, he was very resilient, and he knew he could cook. I mean, this guy was magnificent.
He wasn't classically trained.
No, his mama.
Self-taught, yeah.
And what is different about him is because he grew up in a rural environment where you learned how to do the best with what was available to you. Mm. It wasn't like he could import snails from France, or he was using French wines to cook with and stuff. No, I mean, he was taking basic ingredients you could either fish for or grow and turning them into magic. And he had the best sense of taste with his kind of food of anybody I've ever met. I mean, he had just an incredible sense of how you work spices and things, and that's what led him. I mean, he designed all of the magic seasoning, the base magic seasoning line, which was 7 products. And he used to sell them out of the restaurant in little Ziploc bags that had about 2 ounces of product in them. And at this point, Paul was our first customer when we went into business Kajun Kettle was a pasta manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
We made fresh pastas. And that goes back to me going to Kryvac. Clark Bernier, who was the chef there, taught me about why shelf life, how you make shelf life, the science of what they were doing in bags. And I put that together with pasta, and we made a bagged, vacuum-packed, fresh product that had a 45-day refrigerated shelf life, which nobody had. I mean, we were one of the very first people in the country to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd take the bag and you'd open it and you'd kind of wiggle a little bit and you'd separate the strands and cook it, right? And Paul, I got this appointment with Paul, and I brought him some, and he got, because look at this, all right, go cook it, bring it back to me. And from that point on, we were his pasta supplier. And Paul spent the next day, he said, come back tomorrow. All right?
So when you're working with him, was this after he had gone bankrupt 3 times?
Oh, he'd gone bankrupt. Then he got hooked up with the Brennan family in Commander's Palace. And he was brilliant there.
Okay.
And he finally left Ella, who was an astounding human being and the best talent spotter I think I've ever heard of.
Well, you hear his process for finding talent.
Oh, Paul's?
3 interviews, 3 1-hour-long interviews, and it was amazing listening to Frank talk about his experience going through that process. He would come to a room, there was a room full of people, 1-hour interview, he'd leave, the next time he'd come back, same room, fewer people, 1-hour interview, third time, a lot less people,
yes.
1-hour interview. And that's hire slow, fire fast mentality right there.
Right.
Like, and then even before they start, where do you want to be? What are your goals? How can I help you get there? That's just a hint of what you're that's powerful stuff.
Well, Paul was very much into the people who worked with him because he had to put a lot of trust in them. He had to teach them what he wanted them to do and show them his style of cooking, like RU. Okay, you're supposed to cook it very slowly over fire. It takes 45, 50 minutes. Nah. Let me show you how you do that. You get that oil so it's smoking hot. You dump that flour and you stir like crazy. You don't stop stirring like crazy until it's dark enough to go. And I can make a walnut-colored roux in 9-10 minutes. And you can make it in big quantities. And it just, stuff like that. Paul was just wonderful. And he loved to teach people how to do stuff. He gave away, you realize he gave away the formula magic seasonings. You can look it up online. He actually gave you the real formula, the real blends.
Generosity was his MO. You could definitely tell. But generosity, the more you give, the more you get. And I think there is a lot of truth to that too.
Yeah. And Paul was just Paul. Paul had this very magnetic attitude, aura about him. And he loved people, and it showed. I mean, he would sit in the back of the restaurant by the door of the kitchen door, and there was a window and a door. And he'd see everything that went out into the restaurant. And his problem was he would have a spoon and he would taste it. And I mean,
that catches up over time. But also
it also maintains heavy waste. I mean, it was bad. And Paul went through a whole bunch of different and difficult processes in things he was doing. I mean, it wasn't all smooth sailing for him. Paul had set up, at one point in time, when he was writing the book, okay, he had set up a little side kitchen in what was in a driveway. And he went to Sears and bought the cheapest gas range he could buy and the cheapest electric range he could buy. He went to Woolworths or Walmart or someplace and bought the cheapest pots and pans he could. Now, he says if they can cook this, he'll bring in women to cook and different non-professionals and say, okay, I want you to first cook it on this stove, then this stove. And that's how he proved all of his recipes for his first cookbook.
Wow.
I mean, they all work perfectly because of that. All right. While that was going on, upstairs, there was a kitchen. They were cooking. They were working for some party or something. And Paul was still walking. He was lumbering a bunch. He was a heavy guy, right? One of the guys had a bain-marie, a rondo rather, that was full of oil that he'd just taken off a stove that he'd been frying in. and he put it on the floor, and Paul stepped back into it.
Oh, no.
All right, and Paul had severe burns on and fell. I mean, it was just it was the worst nightmare you can imagine in a kitchen accident.
I'm just like, I'm visualizing how
you hear that, and your body immediately.
And just to such a good man, too. It just makes it that much.
He said, get me help now. He ended up, he had third-degree burns on one of his feet. And for somebody that big, treating you is very difficult. It's very dicey.
Yeah.
They ended up setting him up in an RV out front of the restaurant. And he did the same damn thing in front of the restaurant, out of an RV, and he ran that restaurant all day, okay?
I don't want to forget that this is a story about the two of you, but I'm loving Paul's stories.
Paul was great. Paul got a lot of Paul stories, but he was a major influence on my life and on how you get up and you do it again.
Distill that influence.
Yeah, get up.
What was the just get up?
Get your ass up, out, get moving
just
again. Nothing's going to happen if you keep sitting there.
Ain't nothing to it.
Nothing to it.
But to do it.
Let it go.
I think he was also very exacting about what he did and how he did food, because Pierre was telling me about stories about how he'd go and see Paul, and Paul would do about 8 iterations of the same dessert and just change it slightly every single time, and just looking for a better taste.
The slightest edge.
Yeah, right, Pete?
We did 23 iterations of a mocha cream cake one afternoon. 23.
Wow.
Okay. They had kitchens. They had 3 people upstairs baking. All right. Nope. Change this. Nope. Do that. Do this. Change this. All right. And now go back to the third one you showed me. Do it again. And bring me that one. Bring me this one. I mean, just back and forth like that. End of the day, you felt terrible. Because you had so much sugar in you. You're just like,
It feels like me after like 3 or 4 interviews in one day and everyone wants to feed you. You're like, yeah, of course. By the first one, I can relate.
Well, this was like how, and Paul would remember, exactly what he liked about number 3, and then there was number 9 that did this, and this is how we're going to put this together and make it. That's why his food worked, and he was very willing to be wrong, okay, and change. And he was very willing to listen to somebody who said, Paul, I think if you try it this way, you'll get a better result. And he encouraged that in all of his staff. And he had some pretty crazy guys working for him, okay? They had a staff when we were doing pasta with them that was just bonkers nuts. I mean, they were in there. They were all humping. They were all chugging along in there. We brought Macys in there, as a matter of fact. We were going to sell pasta fresca in Macys in New York. And they're downstairs in that fancy food part. And we bring the buyer in, and they're all like, one of the chefs, Randy, was looking out at me, and he's smiling. And I'm going, uh-oh. And so dinner comes. And you remember you sat at big tables here. It was open seating. People sat with people. You didn't get a table to yourself. We got 4 of us there, so we filled a 4-top up. And they had a seafood pasta dish that was just spectacular. And so this thing lands in front of me. It must have weighed 7 pounds, 8 pounds. Randy had piled this thing up like this. And they're all looking out of the kitchen, out of the window of the kitchen to see how the reaction would be. And we were just cracking up.
I'm loving the stories. Thank you so much.
It was fun.
But I want to hear more about how to recreate and have the same level of success that you two have built for yourself, doing your level of work. And how big of a deal was it to have somebody like Paul Prudhomme be your first customer?
He spent the whole day calling every chef in town that he had a number for and recommended us.
So a little lesson in the power of networking.
Boy, was it.
Yeah.
Boy, was it. And when Paul Prudhomme called, you did take the call.
Yeah.
Okay. End of statement.
So how did you first, was it because you were from New Orleans? How did you make this connection?
With Paul?
Yes.
I had missed, because being in San Francisco, his rise in commanders was between 75 and in 79 he opened K-Paul's and was going forward. So he'd been in business for about 2 years when I got there, and had, gone from, I was commanders, and I'm pretty good, to getting pretty heavy press, and his stature had really grown in the industry. And, I mean, I was told I could see him, and I asked for an appointment. He said, sure, come see me. You making fresh set? Yeah, I'd like to see what that looks like. And like I said, he was always wanting to see things, and he was willing to try new things.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a big lesson, too. And again, we're just learning through our mentors, right? You would think a restaurant like K. Paul's, which was just so known for it being like the essence, or like at least his rendition of the essence of Cajun, or wouldn't have been Cajun, I'm sorry, Creole, correct?
No, he's Cajun.
It was Cajun.
He's definitely Cajun. Creole's New Orleans. Cajun is the country.
Thank you very much. Being the essence of that, right? I think some people worry, like if they outsource production, that it's almost like a cheating, or like cutting up in bags, right? There's something wrong with that. What are your thoughts as I'm saying? Is there a stigma? I don't want to be. I'm trying not.
No.
I hope that's not an
No.
offense
No.
to say, but I'm trying to prove the benefit in this. And someone like Paul Prudhomme sees the benefit in it. Like there's got to be something here. Like what is the benefit in it?
Well, I mean, there comes a point where your growth forces you to do things because you can no longer execute at the quality level you want to get the volume you need.
And you perfectly spelled out his standards.
Oh,
like, and if he's willing to take this route, there's definitely a stigma, I think, within the industry when it comes to like not taking food like that as seriously. But at the same time, fill in the blank.
The majority of successful large independent and say people who own 2 or 3 small chains thrive on the fact that they can get some manufacturing help.
I think a part of the issue, and this is just one thing I've noticed, and correct me if you think it might be something else, but I think there's some ego involved in the industry and maybe a little too much pride.
Well, there's ego, and then there's reality. Okay, the ego is always there because they're the guy looking at you saying, "Don't you ever tell anybody you do work for me."
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, we
do experience this? Is this you're shaking your head?
All the time.
Yeah,
definitely.
And so that's fine.
And I understand it.
Think about running the operation. You've been in them, and you've got a lot of bodies back there, and turnover is always an issue. You're trying to maintain a standard of quality, especially around, say, your name dishes. Okay, and let's say it's got 5 or 6 different components with a sauce or something, or a soup, a liquid. You realize that, all right, I can have this guy do the time-consuming part that doesn't take a executive chef, that doesn't take
making $30-$40 an hour,
a really great line cook
Right.
to do, but will help him. And so the real smart people who know how to use this, there's a concept called Semolina's here that was run by 3 guys called the Taste Buds, and they have Zias now. Gary Darling knew how to take a product, and he would bring it in, and they would add 2 or 3 things to it. It would burst it with flavor, and you would get exactly the results you want, and you could replicate it. And the food was spectacularly good. You have tight controls over what the manufacturing side can do and what the output product has to be. I mean, the specs we deal with are so bloody narrow. How thick is it? What color is it? What ingredients are you allowed to use? What are you not allowed to use? How is it handled? How all the things that go into making food taste the way food tastes, rather. So we do that. Only difference is our tools are bigger. Mm-hmm. I mean, a restaurant might have a 150-gallon kettle if it's doing a hell of a lot of soups and sauces. I mean, ours are substantially larger.
Yeah.
We run Alfredo sauce at 5,000 pounds a batch, and it's bigger stuff.
Yeah. One of the questions I ask all my guests is, what's one thing that you outsource for? So basically, that's a tool or service, or not, it's not a tool part, sorry, but a service to do something that you can never do as well in-house. And the reason why I ask that question is to help connect good people with good people. Also, I want people to understand that if you can find somebody, especially if they're local, right, and support local economy, who does something way better than you could ever do it. Let's use bread as an example. Almost all of us outsource bread, right? If we're a sandwich shop, we're not going to make our own bread if we don't have to. If there's a bakery down the street that's famous, right? Why not source the bread from the bakery? Why not use that mentality with other things? If you can't do it as good as this company that does it, that's what they do, then why not save yourself the labor costs? If what's wrong with supporting your neighbors and supporting other businesses? What's wrong with that?
Plus,
it creates more opportunity too and diversity in the industry,
and it helps you run your operation. Think about, all right, they say, well, I can make this cheaper, and I go, you really can? You think you can? Okay, let's talk about that.
Right. Right.
Let me see your formula, your recipe. First of all, in all the years I've been doing this, when an owner hands me the company recipe, the establishment's recipe for a sauce, okay, and I say, fine, that's great. I'll take the recipe now. I want to come in when who makes your sauce? They said, well, that's Chef William over there. I said, fine. I need to come in the day he makes this sauce and watch him do it. Okay? So I go in and watch him do it, and I take the recipe, and I watch William do it, and I have yet to have him make it exactly the way that recipe is. It's now chef to chef, especially if he's the third different guy that's made it since this was written, which is not unusual. Okay? It's migrated with each one of them. He makes it better. He's a sloppy measurer. Okay?
Or he doesn't have an ingredient that he normally needs to use.
Ingredients change. Okay? Ingredients change. Nature changes stuff. Tomato crops are different every year.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Some corn is sweeter than other corn. You're working with all these variables. Okay? But virtually none of the recipes I've seen match what the hell they think is in that pot. And the technique is completely different. It's been changed. And the changes take place over time. And when you change something over time gradually, it's very hard to discern, for you to discern the change, because you're now pretty zeroed in on what's now. But that's not what you handed me. That wasn't the original recipe. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two, what's your yield? And then you get well, I guess it's what I put in the pot. And I said, no. You have evaporation. Mm-hmm. You have mismeasurement. You have all these things that go in. You don't know what your yield is. All right. When we make something for you, here's 20 pounds of it.
Yeah.
And we're accurate. That bag is accurate to 0.05 ounces.
What is that in grams? Do you know?
There's 29.3 grams, 29.35 grams.
It's pretty close in a big batch.
Yeah. All right. When you're buying, when you're doing this, you're buying 20 pounds, you got 20 pounds at least. Mm-hmm. Okay? And you know exactly what you paid for it. Cisco, here's the bill right here.
Yeah.
So you know what's cost going in. You really don't know.
Yeah,
when you're doing
precise,
it yourself. And how much labor do you have in it? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the most tricky.
Right. That is the trickiest thing. And that's the most expensive part.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
They would be here anyway. I'm saying not necessarily. They could be doing other things for you that improve, the way your food looks on the plate, that improves the way that you handle the protein. Instead of sitting here working like hell on this one product, we can do this for you.
Yeah.
He can concentrate on making sure that the protein that's going there is accurate and it's cut accurately. The meats are cut across the grain, not with the grain. All the stuff that happens to you when people are jammed up and are going too fast to pay attention and do the right job.
So I feel like I was gonna save this question to the end. I usually ask this question at the very end of all my interviews. The mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. We inspire by sharing our stories, and our we empower by sharing our knowledge. And the whole transformative part is like, how can we change this industry to work better for more people, right? And I feel like, and one of the things that's coming into my mind, and maybe you can answer that question if you have another thought, but one of the things that comes to mind is by creating other verticals and encouraging more people to outsource and to support other businesses. And I think if we can encourage this more on a local level, then we can lower labor costs. We can create more businesses that don't need brick and mortar storefront, and we can we can just kind of level the playing field and kind of like flatten the I don't know, the economic, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Well,
those Blue Oak boys had us out like last night. I'm not gonna lie, they showed us a good
Darn
time.
those boys,
yeah,
all
so
their fault,
I'm
eh?
struggling coming up with the words right now. I'm not gonna lie.
Held
but
your head open and poured. Yeah,
it shares the wealth.
Spread the
It
wealth.
spreads
You
the wealth
share
out.
the
You know,
wealth, yeah.
and there's a lot broken. I think this is part of the solution, is encouraging people to stay in their freaking lane, right?
Yeah.
And then to outsource and support your neighbors,
mm-hmm.
right?
Well, it should allow you to do the big thing, which is necessary, is to increase the benefits to the people who work for you, give them a better working environment, take some of the heat off of them, especially financially,
Mm-hmm.
And yourself. I mean,
and
because
yourself.
I mean,
Yeah.
these days, good laborers, good workers are very hard to find.
Yeah.
And keep.
And I think you guys are proof that there are people who manufacture and produce food to be used in this manner and to do it really well. You know?
That's the key.
And I think there's a
the
stigma
quality
out there.
issue.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah, the
stigma out
quality
there, and there
element.
are some companies that
Yeah.
probably don't have your standards. I recognize
There-
that.
Right.
Quite a
Yeah,
few.
Yeah.
But you can do this, and I think maintain standard, and as long as your ego doesn't get in the way. I think that's the biggest culprit right there. And again, I don't want to put words and thoughts into your mouth, into your brains.
Yeah.
But where are you at?
Well, it's you notice how many people have left the industry in the last 2 years, and don't want to come back
Mm-hmm.
because they're burned, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's a rough industry. Hey, you ever wait tables? I mean, I'll go be a waiter. Come on, go pick
Yeah.
that tray up.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to do that deadlift up for every table you do all night long. All right, and that tray gets anywhere from 10 pounds to 40 pounds of food on it. You got to do that for a while. Go listen to some people who are less than courteous with you for no reason other than they feel like they're empowered to be that way and you're not.
Yeah.
It just there's a lot of things about that.
Yeah.
But I think by you go to look at Brightson, okay? Brightson's got a lot of family and friends who have worked for him. They are wonderful
Still
employees.
working for him.
And they are. And they're
Still.
they're Rhonda, Myrna. I mean, they are
35 years later?
Yeah, he's
It's
not.
That's
crazy.
incredible.
Their turnover is nil.
He's a special. He's a really special
He almost had
guy.
me at tears a few times during
Yeah.
our
Oh yeah,
conversations.
yeah. He's a
Oh,
really.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when
He's a
we
great
went in there,
employee.
we went in there with our daughter, Brooke. Our oldest daughter was with us, and he came to the table, and we were with a business associate whom we really like a lot, and we were all sitting there at the table together. And he said, "How did you like tonight's meal?" And we said, "Oh, it was great." And he says, "They're all Brooke's recipes." You know, and he gave her that, and of course they weren't, but it was kind of his charming way of including us all into that wonderful kind of magical world that is.
He helps.
fabulous
He's really good
restaurant.
at letting you feel seen.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Well, he's frank.
Yeah.
Did you know that Bruce Springsteen goes to? That's where when he's in
No.
town, he goes and eats there with his whole
No,
band.
Bruce
and
flies
goes
them.
there.
Bruce flies them up to New Jersey and out to California to feed him.
I did not know that, but
Okay.
Bruce kind of has a special place in my heart right now because I was in Asbury Park not too long ago, and I learned that that's
Oh,
where
really?
he's from. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, he, the guy that I left Macys to work with, Ron Gompertz. Hi, Ron. He was just a wonderful guy, and he grew up in New Jersey, and he was a huge fan of Springsteen's,
Yeah.
and he used to play his music for me and say, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And I'd say, "No, I never heard of him." And so he'd play his music super loud in his place, and introduced me to that wonderful music, and which I'm very grateful for. But it's pretty great that he chooses Wrightson's to go, eat
That
at
is- that
and
is
hang
special.
out at.
I've been loving these stories. I really have been. And that's why I've been letting these deep stories of the culture, the history of the people that work here in your, like, I think you guys bring this to the conversation. But I want to shift the focus of the conversation to get advice, because I think we've convinced the listeners that this is a very good career path. And I think we need to encourage more people to think like this to, again, spread out the wealth. We're going to come back to that question. What do you think the industry needs to change? We'll save that. But that was just I felt like it felt right there, but we'll come back to that before we go to the speed round. Thinking about people who are listening to this, young professionals, young chefs who are listening to this and thinking, I think that might be for me. I'm interested in this. What is your advice for that person who's listening to this, who might want to get into your line of work, and how you've built what you built? What do you think the trick to your success has been?
Well, the great path then is like if you're a Johnson & Wales guy and have been through that, and you've got the culinary skills behind you. Okay, I mean you've got that basis. There are university courses. LSU's got one. Michigan's got a great one of food science that you can take a shortened course and end up with a degree in culinology. And with a degree in culinology, with that training behind you, you'll get in, albeit at a fairly entrance level, but into the industry to do research and development.
What is the difference between culinology and culinary?
Culinary is the restaurant side of it. It's the food, the taste, the flavors, this. The ology is the science part of it. Of how do I do that, and how do I make it? How do I make the food do what I need it to do to service or to fit the situation the food has to be in?
Got it.
I mean, just like anything else, if you're an artist, the creativity that you have and feel and develop is really important, but you also have to have the business side. I mean, you have to, and it's very difficult to incorporate that into the same person. So it's good to have somebody who can look at the nuts and bolts and the numbers of business that's helping you, that's working with you, that understands how important the creativity is, but also can help you, guide you in the way that you need to go to make money.
Yeah.
To be profitable.
So I guess I was curious. So is that more your side, the numbers?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe
and you're more the
bit.
creative side?
Yeah.
You don't want me reviewing statements every day.
Okay.
I mean,
You did
hold
mention
hold a gun to my head, okay?
When you were telling the story off air, I think it was actually about your father and how he'd go through, Frank would go through and look at the stocks or the businesses, and you just never really had a knack for it. But maybe you inherited some of that
but
strengths.
But here's the thing about New Orleans. The New Orleans and Pierre embodies that to me. Has a very Latin spirit, and I grew up in Latin. I was born in Latin America, and that's a very big part of who I am because my mother. And New Orleans has that wonderful, magical essence about it. My father is a huge jazz fan. That was born here. How many other cities, I'm getting goosebumps time, how many other cities that have developed their own music, their own culture, their own food, and had so much of an impact in so many different ways on the world, and it's also a fabulous, fun-loving, open place to be and it's very Latin that way. And people love to have fun, and they love to enjoy themselves. And, in Latin America, you say, look, you can work as hard and as long as you want, but you have to take some time out to have fun. Otherwise, what is the purpose of life?
What's it all for?
And I think New Orleans really embodies that it has that kind of that magical love of life and passion for good food and good times that makes being here and coming here a really wonderful experience for a lot of people. Of course,
who can argue against
that?
It
has the downsides too, but it's just a really fantastic place in so many ways.
So does that tie into the business aspect of what we were talking about before, and the business elements of how to make this work, this business model? How does that affect that?
Sure, because I grew up knowing that, as a lot of people do, that the most important times for families are often around a dinner table or breakfast table or eating together and enjoying each other's company, enjoying fabulous food that food brings back so many incredible memories from childhood for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's why family recipes are important. And so the power of food, again, going back to what Paul Prudhomme said about the power of food to impact you and impact your life is huge.
Yeah. So one thing I'm curious about is the branding, and when you have a lot of the products you guys produce leads with Monica and then the name of whatever the product is.
Right.
What's the strategy behind the branding, and get into that element of it? And I mean, did that all start with Monica Crawfish?
Crawfish Monica.
Sorry,
yeah.
I got it backwards.
That's
Crawfish
okay.
Monica. Thank you.
Kind of, yes, it did. Well, Pierre developed it, named it after, and then I came into the kitchen and I said, "What did you?" We were.
This was early on,
early on,
yeah.
and we were going to visit some friends who were house sitting for someone in a very nice part of New Orleans, and I went into the kitchen and I said, "Wow, this is really good. What is it?" And he said, "I'm going to call it Crawfish Monica." Just like on our first date, he said, "I'm going to marry you one day," and I thought, "Wow."
So we'll see about that.
So Crawfish Monica was born, and then we found out when we did food shows that the sauce was so incredibly popular and people loved it, and we knew we had a hit on our hands. And then eventually they allowed us to do it at Jazz Fest, not the first year, because somebody else had a monopoly on pasta.
So you started with pasta, as a reminder to the listeners,
Right.
and you were trying to find a way to move the pasta. Is that kind of how the story goes?
We added sauces to help sell pasta.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That was a kind of a brainchild of both of ours. Maybe,
So maybe there's a business lesson there.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're making a product, you can't just make the baseline product. You need to maybe create something else to go with it.
Well,
What's going on? What's the business strategy here?
What's the business strategy is what most people say. You not only think, "Oh, well, it's going to be great. I just got this product into X chain, X store." So that's great. Now, how are you going to get it out of there?
Yeah.
And they go like this. And I said, getting it in is easy. Getting it out in somebody's cart with him paying for it is hard.
Well, we had to
That's
educate.
the hard part of the whole deal.
So how did
We had to educate people on how to for how to use fresh pasta because
So yeah, tie it together. So basically, you sell pasta, and that's not enough because people don't have a reason to use it. And by selling the additional ingredients that go with it, and maybe streamlining the process for the consumer, now they have this new sauce and they need a reason to buy the pasta. Am I hearing that correctly?
That was,
Yeah.
the two went hand in hand.
Okay.
I mean, we started out, we had pesto, which we still make, same formula. We had a marinara, which was quite good, we still make. And we had Alfredo sauce. Then we added Monica sauce after that. That was the fourth one. And they were filled into a cup, and we had a 1-up sealer. So it's like the motions it took to make this was about 20 seconds.
Okay.
All right. Fillers now do maybe 200 cartons a minute. And we were doing one at a time and then chilling it off.
our pesto sauce was developed for us, which is kind of unusual, by Luca Tassani. And Luca Tassani was an Italian chef from Florence, and he made it for us. We asked him, and we had to how much basil. We had to go through so much basil and different kinds of basil and different kinds of oils and blah 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 in order to make our final product, which we love, which we think is really great. But it's like every iteration of development is a long process sometimes. Yeah.
So are most of your products like this, where you create products that complement each other for the sake of moving them off shelves? Is that the part?
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes yes and no. I mean,
Yeah.
the majority of our stuff is our business is really two main areas, okay?
We haven't even told the listeners how the impact that Crawfish Monica has had.
Yeah, impact's pretty interesting.
Yeah, maybe.
But we sell what's called the street, which is via the national food distributors, the big guys, a branded product, that we push at shows and things like that to get the restaurant community to use. And then there's the other side of it, of the custom work we do for restaurant groups primarily and large independents, where we take a very high volume soup or sauce, and we make it for them, or we make the base for them, so that they can add a few things to it and finish it. It just depends on who and what. But that's probably about 50-50. So a lot of what we do is invisible. It doesn't have our brand on it. A lot of the other stuff does.
Okay.
And so we have a continuity of brand by monikers. So when you pull us up at, say, a Cisco, all right, they'll see all these different products we make, listed out, and they can see what's going on and say, they make this, let me try this, let me try that, and you get more sales. Oh, they have a corn and crab bisque. Oh, I want that.
So
Or a sweet potato
on the
bisque.
website, you have like all like your products listed, right? That's mostly for what, like wholesale or to order online. But then the whole other side of your business is you're working one-on-one with brands, which you're basically helping them develop unique recipes for them because they want to stand out. They don't want to be like anybody else, which is understandable. I think this is kind of where we can do this on a smaller level, like locally. If you're a chef who doesn't necessarily want to work in a restaurant, but you're a damn good friggin' chef, you're talented and super creative, how do you market yourself as a chef? And how do you start a business where you're just contracting yourself out on your and paying, having people pay you for your intellectual property? Like, what's the value in that? Help us understand the value in that and what we should be charging and what we can get.
Consulting is a bear, all right? Because I may be working for you right now, consulting on some products, but I have to be looking for and actively marketing for the next job to come behind you, because it's a not a full-time job, it's a span job. So you got to keep all those blank spaces filled with business, so you go hungry. So consulting is a very difficult thing to do. Okay, first of all. It's not the easy way out.
Yeah.
Okay. To get started, though, you need to find that first client that'll believe that you can actually do the work for them, and that's really the hard part. And
that first client is Paul Prudhomme.
Or somebody like that
helps a lot.
It helps,
but it doesn't happen overnight. And you didn't. No. This didn't happen for you overnight. You did years of working as a chef, and you had a reputation before leaving too.
Right. There was a guy here named Warren LaRuth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Warren was
Warren? Brilliant. Okay, he had been in the military. He was classically trained. He got out and went to Michigan, I think. I can't remember what school he went to, but he came down here, and his first job as a research chef was for Seven Seas. Yeah, he invented Green Goddess salad dressing for them, and he designed all of their line of salad dressings. They still use his formulas. He is no longer with us. He opened a restaurant called La Rousse across the river, which was gorgeous fine food. I mean, totally fine dining. It's the only restaurant at that time that you went in the kitchen, there weren't measuring cups. There were scales. Because volume lies, weights don't. And if he saw you take a pinch of something and throw it in his food, that pinch threw you out the door. Okay? I mean, it was he was most rigorous about following the way the recipe. He was most vigorous about following the way the recipe was laid out.
But and in a way, he reminded me a lot of Paul Prudhomme because he was very exacting. He was very precise, but he also had a really big heart.
Yeah.
In that he helped. I mean, Paul has so many disciples, I suppose is one way to put it. People who were students of his and whom he helped and put in business. And Warren was very similar in that if he knew you and liked you, he would do anything for you, and he would never charge you for it. And and he would do it for. I mean, when Paul liked our product, we didn't ask him to call anybody. We never asked him to do anything for us. He just did it out of the goodness of his heart. And that's really what Warren did as well. He and Pete, got along super well, and so he wanted to help us.
Yeah. So back to this idea, if you think you're cut out for this and you how do we market ourselves? How do we know what to charge? And like realistically, how many clients do we need to be able to do this as a full-time job? How hard is it to get started? Like, what do we need to know?
I would not do it. To go on your own as a starting point, I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay.
I would recommend getting a job. There are virtually every food manufacturer has at least one person. Some have up to a staff of 6 or 8.
So just like if you want to open a restaurant, don't go out. Like, I mean, you can open a restaurant with zero experience. It's going to be hard.
Hard?
You're going to learn a lot of things the hard
and
way.
you'll have about zero success of
zero
chance of being successful.
The 0.001% of people who pull it off.
But my wife is a great cook. Don't worry, we can have a restaurant.
So go to work for a manufacturer.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go to work.
Is there something about wives?
No, but
We
I mean,
still have
you
to
know,
talk
this
about
is
advice
what
on
you
husband
hear.
and wife.
Well, we throw
partners.
great
I've
parties.
done
We
that.
throw great parties. So I'm
Careful.
going to open a restaurant.
Yeah.
No, please jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
Let's take the money down. We'll go to a balcony on Bourbon Street and throw $1 bills down at the crowd. You'll lose $5,000, but you'll only lose $5,000.
Yeah.
You won't lose $1 million, $2 million.
But there are
$3
also
million.
other people that are not food manufacturers that hire research chefs.
Yeah, researchers
I
chefs
mean,
are all over.
They are, and people who sell flavors, for instance,
Oh, God.
flavor companies, people who are in the industry as suppliers to the industry, also need people who are good at developing recipes. Some of whom we know, and some of whom have helped us in that they've recommended us to other clients, people that they're working with, and they say, "Hey, do you want a good research chef? Talk to Pete." I mean, Pete's like Pete's. Well, okay. I know I'm biased, but I think Pierre is really, really super talented, and not only does he understands the chemistry of food.
Yeah.
Not just how it tastes, but why it tastes the way it does, and how to achieve that in other ways. And scaling up, one thing that's interesting is that you making something in a small pot or skillet, and then scaling that up to thousands of pounds of production is a real skill that you kind of, I don't know how Pete learned it, but Pete, did you teach yourself how to do it?
More or less.
Yeah.
You make mistakes.
It's kind of a big deal.
What is the biggest challenge that comes with that people don't consider, that you've learned the hard way over the years you've been doing this?
Well, the food doesn't behave in a steam jacketed kettle with agitation the same way it does in a pot.
Okay.
With fire under it.
Yeah.
Okay. Lots of different stuff goes on.
So I would imagine such a big volume, like the bottom heats up far hard. Like maybe it gets too hot in the bottom, and it doesn't.
Cream sauces. I mean, think of a cream sauce. Think of a cheese sauce. Okay.
Yeah.
And you need to get it at least to 165 degrees, 170 degrees. Milk scorches at about 160.
So the bottom's burning, the top's still cold.
You've got to You've got to make sure that you are
Agitation has to be-
agitating it sufficiently so
Right.
it doesn't.
Okay, so is that like pumps, circulation?
It's actually mechanical arms that have
Okay.
scrapers on them
Got
that
it.
rotate inside of the kettle.
Okay.
And the new kettles are so unbelievably intricate, and all this stuff is now computer controlled, and it's astounding. It's the kettles are on load cells.
Okay.
So you can make sure that ingredient actually got in, because it comes in checklists, and you watch the weights change, and wait a minute, I'm at 4,040 pounds. I ought to be at 4,090 pounds. I'm missing something. What am I missing?
Right.
All
and I
this
think
stuff.
that what Pete did was you have to understand, not only he's always looking for new ways to do things, and he learns new things quickly, but you also have to keep in mind that when you're doing something differently than it's been done in the past, what are the ramifications? What are the cost ramifications, the accounting ramifications behind that? Maybe you make it faster, but something else is lost in the process. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to take into account when you're making food. I mean, it's the kind of the nuts and bolts, like I said before, the nuts and bolts of what you do. It's trying to be as objective as you possibly can, and take some of the wonder and magic.
Yeah. I
out or leave it there, but take a look at the other side too.
I hear you. I feel like we can't wrap up today's conversation. One, we still got to talk about partnership advice. I can't leave that out.
Oh,
especially for our friends here that we've been going for a while.
2 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good for a couple more minutes.
Okay,
Sorry.
so maybe we should attack that conversation now before you have to walk out. A lot of people say don't go into business with family or a partner. What's your advice? Do you agree or disagree? Can it work? Clearly, it has worked.
There's 2 sides to that
So
question.
tell me, Pete, how
Some
does that work?
some families are cohesive and functional. Some aren't. It's just the way life is. Okay, and if you're if you're in a cohesive, functional family, psychologically you can handle it because it's different. I mean, the whole feel is very different. I mean, the idea of one of our daughters taking over our business, I would never force you to do it. Frank had this very successful operation that he sold when the master company went public. He sold it into that. It was a smart move.
My father.
Her dad. And his whole point was, don't chase my dream, chase yours. He was very generous with funding us and getting us started. I mean, without Frank, we wouldn't have been a business. Okay, and without his continued help, because there are bumps that come down the road that will whack you in the head. I mean, we had, for example, we're making pasta, and there was a distributor in Houston that ordered it, and it was the first full truckload of product we had ever made. It was 40,000 pounds of pasta on there, which was for us like this gigantic sale. Okay, and I go to Houston to their grand opening. They go, we've changed our mind. You have your return policy at this point was you could, for an end customer was you could return it. We're returning the whole order.
I don't remember that part of it.
You don't remember it? I do vividly. It almost killed us.
The audacity of people sometimes.
It almost killed us. Okay,
Jesus.
I mean stuff like that. I mean, there's lots of
Maybe I
stuff
just
happened.
blocked it out
But
on purpose.
Frank was.
I don't blame you for burying that memory.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that was early on, and Frank was very supportive.
Yeah.
He liked us, the fact that we were entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I mean that was big. So
Did you change your return policy after that?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
That
No
policy.
doubt.
That's another thing. Never sell with a sales guarantee on a fresh product.
Yeah.
Never. Shame
Good
on
advice.
you.
Yeah.
You'll get your brains beat out.
See, these are things that aren't necessarily like, what's the word? Just obvious for first time person.
right.
So back to the advice on marriage and working together.
The whole idea is if you come from a background where and get along with your family, that you can do that. You can accept criticism. You can accept, the ups and downs. Somebody's going to be picked to run it, that you can agree with that if it's not you.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. There's a whole lot of dynamics that go on.
I mean, I've interviewed plenty of husband-wife couples, or business partners. It can work.
Yeah.
And whenever people say that never go into issue with or business with family, it never works. I feel like it's maybe there isn't an issue with going into business with family. Maybe the issue is with your family.
Yeah, and that's the way I feel too.
Like,
I mean, we have our
there's some
moments.
truth to that. Yeah.
Believe me, we have our moments.
So when you
like
do have the
everybody
moments,
does. Of
you
course.
do have the moments, how do you work through it together?
Oh, you back off and let a little space happen, and then come back and do it. Talk, tone down the rhetoric.
I think mutual respect is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And like Pete said, if you are doing things together and then one person criticizes the end product or something like that, that's something that you have to learn to deal with, to get past, because sometimes that's necessary, and often it's necessary. So if you can take your ego out of the equation for a short while, that's really helpful. But of course, it's easier said than done, and it's
Emotions
a very
aren't that
difficult
simple.
thing. Yeah, and I asked somebody about that once because they were working with their spouse, and she said, "Monica, the thing is that the lows are very low." And the victories are very high. And if you have enough victories, you can overcome the lows because the euphoria that comes and the excitement and the kind of gratification that comes to you at the high moments are things that you can share because you feel like you've both been responsible for it, or at least, or maybe one was responsible for it, and you have to learn to say, hey, that was fantastic what you did, and I'll get my gratification, the next time. But if you can both have good moments together, that's a really wonderful thing. And we've worked with our family, we've worked with our kids occasionally, and
so I think this is actually a really good time to acknowledge two people because this is the last interview on the road. There's been two people that have been traveling with me. They are a husband-wife combo. Savannah and Sam are over here, savandsam.com. They've been awesome helping me. So I need to know if you have a question. One of you have a question, because this isn't, you're a married couple. This question I'm asking is for you. They're being shy right now.
I have a bunch of questions for them myself.
Yeah. Do you want a mic? Get over here. Don't be shy.
Yeah. So it's Sam and I. So Sam was the restaurateur. Like, he's very, I don't know, I feel like you're very celebrated in our community. People really respect you. Oh, sorry. People really respect Sam. And we got out during COVID and then started photography, videography for food and restaurants. But like, one of my issues, like, we got an email the other day that it only had Sam's name on it. It's just like, even Sam was like, well, that's rude. That's my question.
That is a very, very good point. And
thank you, Savannah.
I just remember, I have to tell a story that in the early days, I was using Hilzim more, and an elderly gentleman called and asked for Pierre. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, Pierre's not here right now. And he says, well, who are you? And I said, well, I'm Monica Hilzim. And he said, well, is Pierre your old daddy or something? And I just thought, no, he's not my daddy or something. And he is my husband, but I'm my own person. So I started using my maiden name just because it gave us a little separation. And I think that that's really, really important, because you have to feel like not only are you part of something, but you're your own person, and you need to be recognized as such. And it really does help also if you have different areas of emphasis. My area of emphasis is more retail, and I just, and Pierres is more restaurant oriented. But I feel that it is really, really important as a woman in business that you be recognized in your, in and of by yourself, for who you are. And I remember talking to somebody that we were doing business with, and I said, by the way, I just need you to know that often Pete and I will agree on things, but sometimes we don't agree, and sometimes what his vision is not the same as mine, and that just is kind of goes with the territory, and so it's an interesting dynamic, and it's not easy always.
I will say, as somebody who is working with you guys, Sam reached out to me. And I remember being like, oh, like, am I talking to Sam? Am I talking to both of them? And they both CC'd on this email. I remember being worried about that. And I remember being worried about saying your name correctly. Because she abbreviate it in your Savannah Sav or Sav. See, I'm so afraid of Sav, I know, but I was calling you Sav before or something like that. I was struggling. But I will say this, as a male, and maybe this isn't right, I also worry that if I don't talk to Sam, but maybe there might be some issue with maybe somebody taking the wrong idea. Is that weird? Is that common? Do you feel the same way?
No, I mean I must confess that I send and don't copy her on 100%. We get so many. We shoot emails back and forth like crazy, and I get 200 emails a day, 250 emails a day easily.
Yeah.
And most of them are junk. But so I send them to her, she sends them to me. And, all right, if she wants to tell me to keep me up to speed or copy me in some train about something that's going on in a distributor in marketing that I'm not going to have any effect on, it's just not my deal. I don't read the email. All right. And sometimes, we send them back and forth, and I might not read one from her. She might not read one from me. And so you get that, well, why didn't you tell me? And I said, but
Well,
I did. I told you.
I just heard a deep breath in the microphone.
Yeah.
No, it's usually
It
it's
happens.
usually that
It
I
happens,
read a
yeah.
lot. Well, we had a discussion actually this morning about whether he had sent me your information, and he said, "Look, see, I sent it to you. I sent it right here." I said, "You sent it to me January 18th."
Yeah.
And
Well, that was
I
the first
didn't
email.
read it.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me I should read it.
Well, I think another variable here, and I think when I think guys have a tendency to refer other guys to each other, because it was Phil Mosley that said you should get Pete on the phone. I should point out for the listeners
Pete
if
and
this is
not
getting
Monica.
if this is getting
Not Pete and
confused.
Monica.
I know exactly, but I don't think he meant anything ill by that. I think
Yeah.
it's just kind of like we tend to gravitate towards people like us, right? And we communicate. There's comfort in talking to people that you can relate to. I think that we forget that sometimes. It can. Maybe this is a stretch, but I think I could be better about this, because I'll admit that I thought that I was just talking to Pete today. I didn't realize I was talking to the both. It was pretty obvious I wasn't prepared.
No.
Yes. So
I didn't see that.
so I guess the point I'm trying to make is like we can all be more mindful of it. We should be better about asking the questions, or like what's this relationship going to look like?
Yeah.
And that happens to me in the past sometimes, where I just make silly assumptions. But I don't know if it's because of the way we refer each other, if it's maybe like primal. I don't know what's going on there.
It's interesting. I'm one of three girls, and my father. I worked with my father, and my father was very complimentary to me of my capabilities. In fact, he was really upset that I didn't go to Harvard like he did. I guess, and my mother always told me, have your own life, have your own career. And of course, now we're working together, but I really feel that I've put my own mark on the business, and not just because Monica's is on it, but that was not my idea, by the way. That was somebody else, sales manager's idea that we used to have. And I thought, wow, that makes me look like my ego is huge. And Crawfish Monica, every single time anybody compliments us on Crawfish Monica, I always give Pete credit, because he developed it, and his name's not on it per se, but it's on it because he developed it. So I feel like he deserves a lot of the credit for it. On the other hand, I trademarked the name myself. I did the national trademark all by myself, which is a lot harder to do now, because these days they put a lot of legalese in there and make it harder for you to do it. But I did the trademark myself, and and I gave Pete advice. I gave him a lot of advice in the early days, especially about how I thought we should be doing things. And he took some of it. He took a lot of it, I guess. So not all of it, but he did. Yeah. And we're still always in discussions over things,
Yeah. Yeah.
But our lives in business we've had our ups and downs, but it's been pretty fun.
Yeah. That was a great question. Obviously, it sparked a lot of dialogue. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and I think we can all be
thank
better
you.
about being mindful of that, for sure. Thank you, Savannah. Are you good?
Yeah.
Sam? Okay, cool. It is 30 minutes past the hour, and you did mention you had to get going. I want to make sure are you good? You're welcome. I want you to stay as long as you can. But
I pretty much have to go right now.
Okay.
So
well, thank you for joining us.
This has been wonderful.
You
Thank
were
you so much.
a treat to speak with, and we're
Thank
almost
you.
wrapped up. Pete, and I should point out that Pete and Pierre are the same person.
Yes.
We keep on going back and
I'm
forth.
schizophrenic.
Yeah.
People used to always when they call and they ask for Perry, we know
Yeah,
that
Perry.
they don't know who he is. Or Phil.
Yeah, Phil.
Because
My email is P. Hilzim,
Yeah.
so they read it as Phil.
Born name Pierre. People
Yeah.
call you Peter because
Right.
they had struggled saying
Phil Zim. Is Phil Zim there? Yeah, he's there.
That's funny.
He ain't talking
Anyway,
nobody today.
Thank you
Thank you so
guys.
much
Thank
for
you so
joining
much
us.
for the opportunity.
You were
Appreciate
a treat to speak with. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
We were
Thank
lucky to have you. Anything we have not discussed up to this point that you were hoping to discuss? I think the one thing, just to put into perspective, the level of success, excuse me, the level of success you've had. How many tons of crawfish Monica do you make a year?
We go through about a truckload.
About a truckload. What about just one event per year you have in particular?
Well, that see now we've gone from doing a lot of events.
Yeah.
When we had a plant, it was easy. You had place to store equipment. You had people, trucks, all that kind of stuff. Now, I mean, the equipment's stored in a much smaller space. It's not the same, okay? And so we have cut way back on it. And we used to do a bunch of, and you would get tired. It just beats you to death.
I heard 10 tons for a 1 week event, or is it one day?
I wish when we were really active, the things that we did that were really killers, we were the largest lily pad feeder for emergency feeding in the state of Louisiana.
Wow.
Which meant you would get a phone call. You're on a list from Homeland Security. You get a phone call, and they say, okay, we're mobilizing you. You're now on 8 hours notice. Okay, you're on 8 hours notice. Now, the next phone call costs them money. That doesn't cost them any money. Next phone call says, all right, I want you to go to Alexandria, Louisiana, set up. There's a church parking lot. You're going to set up there. The state police will meet you or will meet you, bring you in, get you set up. We are anticipating, and they give you a number, 5,000 meals, 8,000.
So is this disaster relief type stuff?
It's just disaster relief. And, I mean, we had enough inventory and stuff always, and we would pull our reefer and then pull in other trucks and cart equipment down. It would take us about 3 hours to set up, and we'd get going, and we could feed anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 meals twice a day.
I once also heard that somebody asked you to do some work for them, and you named some outrageous price, maybe like around $50,000.
Yeah.
Not expecting to hear back. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to talk about that?
No.
Okay. I won't get into it, but I mean, when you can name your price like that, it's just a testament of success.
What the story was, that was actually Warren LaRue's story.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sitting with Warren, and Warren was a great guy. Warren's telling me, he's teaching me, which he was good at doing, but he would talk real. He'd go, all right, well, there's 5 things you can do to solve this problem. Boom, 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 boom. Wait, slow down. He didn't. All right, phone rings, and it's Burger King. And they said, well, chef, we have a project for you. Would you take care of it? And he goes, yeah, send me a check for $50,000, and as soon as the check clears the bank, I'll call you back.
Okay.
I'm going, well, that took some backbone. I mean, and Warren was dead serious.
It happened.
He was not going to talk to this guy until he had $50,000 in his checking account.
Yeah.
And he would do that with all these people. And then I'd call him and say, sure, here, you got this, try this.
Yeah. And I know there's a few, I don't know the truth of this, just talking to people, and I don't know what the legalities are with people being, what you're allowed to disclose as far as the recipes you've created that are known nationally, that are famous recipes that if I were to say the name, people would, I guarantee you've heard of these things.
Yeah.
I'm dancing around it because I don't know what I'm allowed to say.
All right. What I'm allowed to say about a lot of things, if I've signed a non-disclosure,
Exactly.
I'm signed a non-disclosure.
Yeah.
Unless you give me permission to admit that I've done something. I mean, we're not talking about Trump and his bullshit, but we're talking about just normal conversations with stuff.
These are billion-dollar brands that.
Yeah. Well, those you be real careful because they all come with billion-dollar lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I'm dancing around the subject.
We do. All right. Monica has trademarked Monica. You notice on this?
Yeah.
You see the registration mark. Okay. Now, under law, you have to enforce your mark, which means that anytime you find somebody using your mark who has not been given permission to use your mark, you have to make them cease and desist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have you hit crawfish Monica? Just Google it.
No, I haven't.
Do it right now.
Okay.
While you're sitting here. Okay. All right, and then we'll tell you how many hits it gets. We find out that there are restaurants who are offering this on their menu. And I know damn well they're not buying product because I check. And I'll go see them and say, look, this is the information visit. Okay, it's registered. Here's a copy of our certificate. You can't use the name. You can sell any food you want. I can't stop you from doing that. Knock off anything you want. You can sell it, but you can't profit off of my name, of my brand, on a registered brand. Okay, so the smart ones, we went head to head with the Hilton okay, which is, a little bit bigger than we are.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah.
And the guy who was running the Hilton Riverside was Paul Buckley, and he was an ex-prize fighter.
Mm-hmm.
So he was that kind of guy, okay? He was going to muscle you around because he thought he could muscle you around. You'd get away with it. So we went back and forth, and he's going, oh, screw you. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to keep selling it. So I wrote him a letter, and I copied the legal department in Chicago at corporate. The next 2 days later, I figure they got the mail. 2 days later, I get a phone call from their lawyers apologizing and saying this will never happen again. Don't worry about it. We're so sorry. Of course, Mr. Buckley will never do that again. And I said, well, what about, you've ridden on my name for so long and made so much money on. What are you going to do about it? I said, well, that we'd have to go to court for.
Oh my goodness.
But they knuckled, and they never did it again. And so you got to play that game. And it's a pain in the ass. I mean, you got to think about the time it takes to do that.
Yeah, and I did a Google search it for the record.
Yeah.
There's lots of restaurants using the name crawfish Monica.
How many recipes are out there for it?
I mean, I see restaurants using it on their menu. I don't know how many different, at least
all over the country.
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean,
All
I
right.
can only
There's
absorb
over
so much right now.
There's over 200,000 recipes to try to duplicate
Wow.
it.
How many pages are there?
All right.
On that search?
And not a damn one of them. I can read a recipe and tell you what it's going to taste like. All right.
Yeah.
That's what I do. And I haven't found one yet that's anywhere near what the reality is.
Yeah, I've loved this conversation. I can't believe we're at 2 hours. Time
good.
guys go. I'm sure you're ready to
edit
eat
it
some
down and
lunch.
get rid of it.
Probably not. Honestly, there's a lot of gold in this, and I hardly edit. And I think that's one of the issues with the world we live in. Everybody edits things down, and you miss a lot. And it's just
You edit
this
to
is
spin,
one
baby.
cut.
You
Yeah.
spin. You don't edit. You spin.
Yeah.
It's really hugely wonderful to be able to sit down and talk about what we do. I mean, because a lot of it is.
By the way, Monica's back.
Oh yeah, back. Yeah, here I am. I just had to. Anyway, I realized. Anyway, I can't do what I need to do anyway. So that's okay.
I'm happy to have you back.
Thank you. But it's pretty. The fact that that crawfish Monica has been so universally recognized. It seems like somebody gave us the book 1,000 Places to See Before You Die, and crawfish Monica is in there. It's under
It's a location?
under Jazz Fest.
Oh,
under
Jazz
Jazz
Fest.
Fest.
Okay. Wow,
Try
that's-
crawfish Monica. So
What an honor.
and
That was fun.
people tell me I'm a celebrity, and I say no, it's really not that. It's just that we happen to develop, and Pete is really talented that way. We happen to develop something that people really love, and they love to celebrate that in their lives. And Jazz Fest, if you haven't been to Jazz Fest, it's the most incredible.
I have to come back for it.
Experience.
What time of year is it?
Last weekend of April, first weekend of May.
It's coming up.
This is the first time in 2 years?
We've
At least
had
2
this.
years?
We've missed two, and it's like missing Christmas and Thanksgiving. Okay, for 2 years in a row,
I bet.
and it's horrible.
And they interview us, on TV
yeah.
sometimes.
How do you feel?
Well,
Well,
how do you
yeah.
feel when they
Like,
canceled
oh,
Jazz
yeah.
Fest?
Of course we are.
Well, we're heartbroken.
great.
So-
We're
Sure.
heartbroken. And we have people come from all over the world,
I imagine, and I want to
Yeah.
respect your time. I realize we're over 2 hours, and I still have to ask one more question. We still have a speed round. So the question I want you guys to answer is: what do you think? How can we go into the future more intentional to spin this industry, the food and beverage industry around? What in your opinion needs to change?
Education, benefits, humane lifestyle.
I mean, that's a lot to unpackage, but I pick one of those. Actually, education. Give me an example of how we can change that.
We're pretty good here. We have a whole number of programs, both on a high school level, on an independent level, and on a professional level of teaching where you can go and get culinary training.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we've got Nichols State, who has the John Full School. We have a number of places where you can go, and they're not Johnson and Wales. They're not the other boys from New York.
CIA.
Yeah, the CIA. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who shall name unnamed? I love to see people who've been to Johnson & Wales talk to people who've been to the CIA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always an interesting. It's never a conversation. It's more of a confrontation.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, it's fun to watch. But the point is, you can learn. There's enough educational opportunity to get you started in the industry, so you're of value walking in the door. You're not totally an unskilled thing. A totally unskilled person is a very expensive
Yeah.
asset.
Yeah.
All right.
And you know, those people feel like they deserve
Right.
more because they're coming in with a degree, and there's a little bit of argument to that invest the money, but they're not really getting their return on their investment.
Well, okay, that's the Johnson & Wales and that's the CIA, okay?
Yeah.
There are programs that are nowhere near as expensive as that. What's CIA, $46,000 now? Something utterly
I don't
obscene.
know. I mean, I spent $200,000, so that sounds like a pretty good deal to me.
Yeah, okay. So, well, you were trying to find something a little more complicated in the kitchen. I'm sorry.
I hear you.
Really?
Yeah. Well, a jet plane, that's a fairly complicated thing to do.
You
And
can kill a lot of people doing both.
And the classroom is really expensive.
That's
Okay.
a good point. That's a very good point.
But anyway, so the point is that there are educational opportunities. There need to be more of them.
Yeah.
And they need to be available.
And
Okay.
I want to compound. Did you finish your train of thought? I
Yeah.
don't want to cut you short.
Yeah.
I want to compound on that. And I think we could be much better at the individual professional level on teaching people not just how to do their job, but understanding the game of business.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree
Yeah.
with that. And I you haven't asked me, but I I agree with that. That's really, really important. And to understand why people make the decisions that they have to make when it comes to a business side, because as I said before, the creative side and the business side are completely different and separate. But they have to work in tandem with one another or the whole thing doesn't work. But what I would like to say, and this is kind of going off on something that Savannah said, is that so women have been making food for many, many, many years. A lot of women are not recognized in the industry, in the culinary industry, for what they do. Sometimes to the same degree as many men are, and I hope that will change, and we need to make that change.
I agree, and I think over the past years, I've noticed a progress. You look at people
A lot of
like,
progress.
Yes.
even
Yeah.
in this city,
Yeah.
Susan Spicer.
Especially Susan.
It's gotten better.
Awesome.
Oh my God, her name's escaping me. Past guest on the show, Nina Compton. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Nina's
she's pretty
fabulous.
talented. Yeah, you might say
We
she's
love
okay.
Nina.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
we
she's
know her a
fabulous.
little bit.
Do we have a far way to go? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a shift happening? I believe so, and I'm happy to start seeing it.
Yeah.
For sure.
I
think in Nina's situation, she's really, really lucky because Larry Miller, her husband, is so supportive of her and so involved in what they do. And they work together, and they seem to work together really well. He really celebrates her and her strengths, and that's a really wonderful thing to see. But oftentimes, women are not recognized in the way they should be, and also minorities. A lot of minorities
I'm
who've
happy you
been
said
in the cooking world, in the culinary world, have not been recognized to the degree that they should be.
Yeah. These are all great things that need to change in our industry. Thank you guys so much. We're back. And the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor? A habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
Passion.
What is your biggest weakness?
Ooh, get
Passion.
tired.
It is so often that the passion is also, or the biggest strength is also the biggest weakness.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
What is one question you ask or thing you look for when you're growing your team?
Passion.
Integrity.
I love it. What is your biggest challenge today?
Keeping everything focused.
How are you dealing with it?
Slowly.
COVID is
Yeah.
a big issue, and trying to stay focused is the hardest thing because there's so much going on.
Share one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team, a core value, a way to be, a way to act.
Caring about the customer.
Respect.
I love it. What is one uncommon standard of service? And this is more of a restaurant geared question, but it applies. Services everywhere in all walks of business. It was geared towards the restaurant industry, like the service, like how do you go above and beyond for the customer? But that is an answer that I think obviously applies to you as well.
Do all that's possible.
Learn as much as you can about your customer.
I love it. What is one book that's a must read to make us a better person?
God.
I loved reading Setting the Table.
Yes. What was your biggest lesson from that book?
Customer is everything.
What is one thing you feel restaurateurs don't do well enough or often enough?
Recognize their employees.
And recognize how important the people that come to eat at their restaurant are.
Mm-hmm. Name one service you've hired or outsourced to. This is the purpose of this question is help good people connect with good people. This is where I would hope people would recommend you.
Preparing produce
Yeah.
and meat for cooking.
Beautiful.
And for me, it would be web design and creativity, web creativity.
Yeah, that's such a fast-moving market.
Yeah.
And whatever is the best practice today, it won't be the best practice tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tough to keep up with. Better to outsource. The next question is a question around restaurant technology. I can ask it. Maybe you have an answer. Maybe you're plugged in. I'm not sure. Want me just to skip it? We can
You should go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What is one technology you've adopted that has had a huge impact on communication, profitability, anything along those lines in your business, but or in your restaurant? But we can say business. That might be cross.
This one's kind of.
We'll just edit that out.
Yeah.
I would say for me, going to a restaurant and trying to put myself in the eyes of the people who are working there is having being able to have a menu at your table that nobody has to bring you. You can access it.
Digital QR.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
To me,
a lot of
that's a big plus.
For sure. Yeah. This is the last question. Get ready. It's a doozy. Here it comes. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you and your work, your restaurants, your business, your recipes would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Passion, love, stick-to-itness.
Monica?
Don't forget the people that put you where you are. Don't forget who is responsible for where you are.
Is that 2 or 1?
Oh, one.
What's another one? You got 2 more.
Give back to the community.
2.
And appreciate the wonder and fun and power in food.
I love it. This has been such a great conversation. I can't thank you 2 enough for taking the time to join me. There was a lot of lessons embedded, and just even getting like the extra history of the individuals in this beautiful city was a special treat. And I mean, it's a privilege to kind of also Paul Prudhomme was such a. I feel like any way we can cement these people's legacy, and you guys helped us do that today. It's amazing, and hopefully I can do the same for you, cement your legacy in the city as well. You guys are great. We wrap up every episode by calling somebody out. So who do you guys respect and admire? A restaurateur that you think, if they were a guest on the show, that they would just change some lives with some knowledge. Call him out.
Frank Brightson.
Ooh, I just had him on the show, and you were absolutely right.
He's fabulous.
he was
a great
phenomenal.
guy.
Susan Spicer.
Okay, Susan, that's two recommendations in 1 week. You better look out. We're coming after you. I'd love to make it happen. I just cannot say thank you enough. If we want to connect with you, if we enjoyed this episode, if we're interested in your services, what's the best way to connect?
You can email us. The common thing is CajunKettle.com or crawfishmonica.com. Both websites go to the same area.
Tell them your email address.
My email is philzim@KajunKettle.com.
What about your email
Mine
address?
is
There you go.
mdavidson, DAVIDSON, @KajunKettle.com.
Beautiful. Peter, Monica, thank you. Or
Thank
Pierre.
you.
Do you prefer Pierre?
I don't care.
Yes,
Okay.
I prefer Pierre.
I think it's badass. I prefer Pierre too.
Yeah.
Pierre, Monica, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, and your mentorship. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable. Now let's eat.
Let's eat.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Cheers.
Woohoo!